Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday. No, I'm sorry. It's Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us. Today is impeachment day, or the Senate trial for impeachment. A lot happening in the news. I was out sick yesterday. Thank you all for your patience. I'm feeling a lot better. It's funny. My kids insisted that I delineate the differences between being sick and having a cold. So let me correct myself. As they corrected me yesterday, they said, "Dad, you're not sick. You have a cold." Okay. If you say so, that's fine with me too. But thanks for your patience and understanding. And here we are. A lot happened over the weekend that I have to kind of recap on. I want to start with the New York Times editorial board endorsement of Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, and their complete repudiation of Bernard Sanders. There was only one person who wanted to endorse Sanders, and that was Maya. I forgot Maya's last name. I'll get it briefly shortly. But Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. Now, here's the thing about that combination. How do you endorse? Listen, I'm not a fan of Elizabeth Warren anymore. But she is certainly no Amy Klobuchar. She is certainly far more progressive than Amy Klobuchar, hands down, without question. And so I don't see how you can, in good faith, the only reason you could endorse both of them is, one, because you don't really want to weigh in and you wanted to find a nice, easy way to weasel out of having to endorse one person. And then two, you could just be, using, oh, they're both women. Let's endorse both women. Right. Because that's all the rave today. But other than that, they have nothing in common politically when you're talking about the spectrum that's on the left. Now, if you compare them to Trump, then obviously both of them are just fine. Right. They're both the same. They're not Trump. They're not going to continue to take our country down the path of total destruction. One will just kind of continue taking us down the path of all of our previous problems, trying to get us back to normal. That's Amy Klobuchar. And another one would do some marginally different things that are more progressive than the other. That's Elizabeth Warren. So I don't know. I'm not really this entire episode was kind of laughable to me. Especially because of how much was made of Bernie Sanders, his comments about race and economics. And, I am one. OK, so in context, Bernie Sanders was speaking about Donald Trump supporters and how some of them, not all of them, are they lean towards Trump's racism because of economic anxiety is the paraphrase version of it. And honestly, look, I'm tired of Bernie Sanders making that argument. Don't lead with that argument, because that's not the case for the majority of them. The majority of Donald Trump supporters enjoy the cruelty of Donald Trump. The majority of the Donald Trump supporters are wealthy. He has a lot of wealthy supporters, so they have no economic anxiety whatsoever. So stop leading with an appeal towards Donald Trump supporters in the name of economic anxiety. That could be something that you follow up with. But when you put it up front, you give everyone the fodder that they need to act as though it was the worst thing that ever happened over the weekend. The worst thing that happened over the weekend was Bernie Sanders saying that Donald Trump supporters are essentially economically anxious. And then I did read the rest of the quote. It's funny. The New York Times only put out that portion of it. Right. The New York Times only put out the portion of Bernie Sanders' quote that made it seem like he had no clue about race. But here's the gag, people. We know that's exactly what the New York Times and other outlets are going to do. Anything that they can possibly do to sandbag Bernie Sanders. And that's why I said what I said a few seconds ago. Don't lead. Don't give your opponents the weapons that they need to destroy you, to attack you. Don't lead with the economic anxiety of Donald Trump supporters. This is listen, okay. two different things here. I know people are like gritting their teeth because of principle. Well, being on principle, they should have some journalistic integrity. Okay, grit your teeth, but get over it, because this is not the world that we live in, and you know this. We know damn well that if Bernie said, look, you still have stations who completely erase Bernie Sanders from the polls. I think it was a California news station that I saw yesterday that had everyone on there showing their polling numbers and did not have Bernie Sanders on the polling numbers. And all they did was lump Bernie Sanders' numbers into the other category. I want you to get that picture. Here's a news station that was reporting on the presidential primaries, the Democratic primaries, and they kept Bernie Sanders off the list, and they lumped his polling numbers into the quote unquote other category. And the quote unquote other category was winning 33%. Right? I bring that up because we are in a time that the erasure of Bernie Sanders is happening every single day by media outlets. So in this type of environment, we can't waste time worrying about the lack of principles, the lack of journalistic integrity. We have to beat them at their game. And to beat them at their game, you can't continuously make the same mistake. Now, I have a point. I have a point that is not critical of Bernie Sanders, but I just have to get this out, right? Don't make the same mistake by leading with this economic anxiety trope. Because one, that's not we're all making assumptions about this group, right? And so Bernie Sanders' assumption is that they are all, some of them are, they've been left out by the establishment, right? That's fine. Stop erring on the side of sympathy with racists. It's easy. It's quite easy to do. Number one, because first and foremost, it's because you're giving your political rivals the ammunition that they need to continue to sandbag you, to continue to attack you and try to cause you to fail and lose this primary. You're just giving them the weapons that they need. Okay. Now, that being said, everyone acted like that was the most atrocious thing that ever happened over the weekend. Oh my God, Bernie Sanders thinks that Donald Trump supporters are economically anxious. And while it was irritating to me, it most certainly is not a thing that is, who cares? Who cares? Quite honestly, because the fact of the matter is, we need the policies that Bernie Sanders is trying to implement because it's going to help everyone in a very material fashion. And so, honestly, the flip side of this isn't so much just the economic policies. The flip side of it is the same argument that I've been making every day for the last couple of months. I have to say it again. The reason you have so many media outlets and journalists and think tankers and all these people who are fighting tooth and nail against Bernie Sanders is because there is not a place for them in a Bernie Sanders' Washington, D.C. There's not a place for a Neera Tanden. There's not a place for MSNBC as it is now. There's not a place for the cozying up with billionaires that takes place every single day on the Democratic side of the equation. In other words, they're fighting now because of job security. They're fighting now. They're fighting Bernie Sanders so hard because they know their job is on the line. Well, it's too bad. There's not going to be much that you can do about it. Iowa's coming up really soon. Boots are on the ground. People are flying in, all in favor of supporting Bernie Sanders. Now, back to the final biggest point. The endorsement that did come from the New York Times was for Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. And to me, that was a coward's move. That was utterly a coward's move. That is a pandering, most certainly a pandering move. Because they're comparing Elizabeth Warren to Amy Klobuchar, or rather endorsing Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren is akin to endorsing Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders. It just doesn't make any ideological or political or economic sense whatsoever. So what was the real message the New York Times was trying to send with their endorsement? One was a complete repudiation of Bernie Sanders, which is cool because ultimately, I don't think any of us really care. The Bernie Sanders supporters certainly don't care what the New York Times has to say, right? Somebody does. I guess there's somebody who looks at, they were waiting with tiptoed anticipation for the New York Times endorsement so that they could figure out who they were going to support. Okay, fine. You persuaded that group. But for the rest of us, we really only would have cared. Honestly, let's be real. The only reason we would have cared about the New York Times endorsement is if somehow they miraculously endorsed Bernie Sanders. But they didn't. Mara Gay, I believe is her name. It came back to me. The woman of color, black woman she was the only one who supported Bernie Sanders for an endorsement. Interesting. Yet the narrative that came out of the entire weekend was Bernie Sanders has a race problem. Partly because Bernie Sanders just with a knee-jerk reaction always comes to the defense of people who are economically anxious. And while that might just be 1 or 2%, the fact of the matter is that he should always lead, if for no other reason but smart politics. But Bernie Sanders is a stubborn old man. OK, Bernie Sanders, if you didn't get anything else from that interview, is that he's a stubborn old man and he won't do things that are necessary for political success. Like he did an entire spiel about how he won't call people and backslap people and wish them a happy birthday and kind of fraternize with people just to get a leg up. He said he won't do that. Okay, fine. Well, maybe that's fine. That he could be him. I'm not criticizing that part of him. But what I am saying is that at some point, stop giving people the ammunition that they need. But no biggie. We didn't really care too much about the New York Times endorsement. And it is what it is. And Bernie Sanders is who he is. And despite any criticisms that I have of him, he's still the best choice. The only choice for me. You listening might still like Elizabeth Warren, and that's cool. I'm not going to attack you or try to convince you otherwise. But for me in my house, we're voting for Bernie Sanders.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
And here we go. All right. Special thank you to CT for increasing your pledge. The Patron party, if you didn't know, that's what we're doing. Special thank you to Phyllis, Safia, Gabriel. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. You rock. Special thank you to Michael. Thank you for becoming a patron over the weekend. You absolutely rock. Chad Hokama, thank you for becoming a patron. Welcome to the family. Simon Beck Thorgard, you told me to not worry about the pronunciation. Thank you for increasing your pledge. Marco Alcivir Perez, thank you for becoming a patron. Todd, thank you for increasing your pledge. And last but not least, I think I saw one more. Timothy Allen, thank you so much for increasing your pledge. You too can become a part of this patron party where we celebrate everyone by going to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and becoming a patron today. And for those of you who are already patrons, thank you all so much. We were asking everyone to just increase their pledge by $1, and you have been doing that in a very consistent and spectacular way. And as such, I will be doing a live stream today. It will not have all the bells and whistles. I'm trying to get the live calls in today, but what I don't want to do is keep putting it off until it's perfect. So I think today I'm just going to go live. I'm going to go live from my office and I'm going to go live on the United States Democratic Socialist page. I'm partnering with them to go live and do a live show. Later this week, I will be broadcasting it across all of the platforms. I may not broadcast on Twitter. I don't know yet, but for certain, YouTube and the Facebook page, the USDS Facebook page. But anyway, the point is you made it possible to get us this far. And because of that, we're going to be streaming live. So totally separate from what we're doing here on the podcast. It's going to be a different experience. So it may be well worth your while to participate in both. Okay. So yesterday was King Day, Martin Luther King Day. And can I just be honest with you? I barely celebrate the day anymore. Here's why. The co-opting that takes place is just, I'm not really good on cyclical outrage. And every year you have some conservative as well as some liberals who whitewash Martin Luther King so much so that they reduce him from being the radical that he was to being just a kumbaya, I have a dream, can't we all just get along? And because of that, every year someone co-opts them. It's like every year I have to get outraged. Every year I have to write an article. Every year I have to do a thread of tweets pushing back against this. Now, don't get me wrong. I do understand that if we don't maintain our outrage, then that gives, who's going to push back against the false narrative. Well, God bless you, whoever's doing it. Whoever out there has the energy to do it every year. But it's almost to the point where I just don't even celebrate the day anymore, because it has become a day of the most egregious woke performance, and it's just tiresome. Like, if you're not going to acknowledge the fact that that Dr. King, when he was killed, was extremely unpopular. That case in point. The FBI, every year, the FBI sends out a tweet in honor of King Day, when, quite frankly, whether or not we can trace the fingerprints all the way back to the FBI in terms of his assassination, we do know without a shadow of a doubt that they did everything that they could to stop him, including suggesting that he commit suicide. They threatened him, and they told him he may as well kill himself, because they were going to destroy him. And that's the type of performer. In my ideal world, all of these people would just shut their mouths and not say anything. And this is what happens, though. And we've talked about this on the show. And of course, in this world of politics, we're going to talk about the same thing over and over again, which is kind of the reason why I don't really want to celebrate MLK days, because I get tired of the cyclical outrage. But one of the things that this society is so good at doing is co-opting radicals and whitewashing them into being something that's palatable to capital. In other words, whereas Dr. King was calling for a massive redistribution of wealth, he was calling for the solidarity of working poor white people and working poor black people, the Poor People's Campaign. While he was calling for that, they have completely whitewashed him into being someone who would have voted for Donald Trump, someone who would have supported capitalism, when he in fact was a democratic socialist. And we've done that. And now they don't even wait till you're dead. Greta Thunberg, the climate activist who sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to come to America to protest, to lead climate protest. They've already started the process while this little girl is still alive. And I guess they figure, well, hell, we can't wait. We cannot wait until she gets old and die, because she's so much younger than us. We'll all be dead, and she'll have so much impact by the time she's an older woman. So we have to start the co-opting process now. So now they're painting murals to her. They're honoring her, like the organizations and corporations are honoring her and trying to do anything that they can to co-opt her and to bring her into the fold, into the establishment fold that allows everything that we see happening in our climate, everything that we see happening, they're trying to get her. They're doing whatever they can. And that is the order of operations. The best way to co-opt a radical, especially if that radical is poor, is to throw money at them. I'm not talking about Greta anymore. I'm just talking about in general. Throw money at them. If you throw money at a radical, then you can really soften, because, everybody wants to eat. Everybody wants to live relatively nice. Everyone wants to be able to not have to live paycheck to paycheck. And so you have a couple of different models of how the system will co-opt you and your message. One is vanity. I don't believe that that's going to work in terms of Greta, but with all the notoriety and all the, but the thing is she made it very clear. I don't want your idolization. I won't change. But that's still a model, right? The fame is a model of co-opting that we see all the time. You can look at people who started off as radicals on Twitter and then they got famous, right? The other one is money. Most of us are poor. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So if someone offered me $1 million to do a show, I don't know if I'm above changing. I mean, because in my mind, I'd be like, hey, I could take that money and do something great for the revolution. And then you get in the office and they'll be like, hey, Dixon, you can't get on there and talk your socialist shit. And truth be told, I've already confronted that. It wasn't a $1 million price tag, but I've confronted that a couple of times. And every time, like a dummy, I walk away or I destroy it or whatever. I destroy the opportunity. But some of us got with money. Others of us get gotten with fame. And then others of us are compromised because of fear. That's what they try to do with King. That's what the FBI specifically tried to do with King. King's life was not pristine. He did not lead the life of a pious preacher, right? King has some dilly-dallying that he engaged in. He had women everywhere. He had women all the time. And they tried to co-opt him by blackmailing him. And you know what he did instead? He obviously did not stop. It seems like he ratcheted it up, right? But the point is this, is that living or dead, the system has a vested interest in taking our heroes and whitewashing them into something that is not only palatable to the system, palatable to capital, but also complicit. Like they take it one step too far every single time. And now, like Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's number one spokesperson, said that that Donald Trump would that Dr. King would oppose the impeachment of Donald Trump. So it's just not enough for them to co-opt you and to whitewash you and make you palatable. They have to weaponize your legacy to their service. And I'm just tired. I'm tired. So I will leave that to everyone. Maybe next year I'll fill up to it. But this year, I just didn't even feel up to participating in the cyclical outrage that is conservatives and liberals co-opting and whitewashing Dr. King and then weaponizing them for their purposes. And then we, those of us who know better, have a reaction to that. I just didn't feel like participating in it. And matter of fact, I don't even know if I did a single tweet or message about Dr. King Day until now. So there you have it. If you want to know what I think about Dr. King and how I celebrate Dr. King, I celebrate him by not celebrating him because I'm tired of everyone co-opting him. That's my story. I'm sticking with it. Yeah. Okay. The American College of Physicians officially endorsed single-payer healthcare reform for the first time. This is a major endorsement. This is important because one of the arguments against Medicare for all or a single-payer system is that the damage that it will cause doctors. Right? It is a fallacious argument, which is why this endorsement actually means something. And I just want to take read a portion of the article from Modern Healthcare. The second largest physician group in the United States on Monday endorsed single-payer healthcare system reform to achieve universal insurance coverage. The American College of Physicians has expressed openness to a single-payer system before, but this is the first time the group has explicitly recommended a transition to the single-payer system. ACP also endorsed a universally available public insurance option in April. ACP's definitive endorsement of a single-payer system is the latest indication of a sea change on the idea in the physician world. I can't say that word this morning. But this is where we have to go. We have to go here. We are the only country, as wealthy as we are like the only wealthy country that does not have a single payer system. And this is absurd. And what it does is we absolutely have created a system where Americans are like the test subjects. We are the guinea pigs for capitalists globally. You can't exploit the people of the UK in terms of healthcare because they have a single payer system there. So where do you go? You go to the United States of America and exploit us over here. Right. And so it's like, as an American, it is your patriotic duty to be the test subject or the economic slave to capitalists. Really, this is not a burden. The burden of medical debt is not something that we see in the rest of the world in terms of wealthy nations, heck, even some poor nations. But in terms of developed nations in the global north versus the global south, we're the only country. And we leave ourselves at the mercy of people who have no qualm whatsoever about taking profits and extracting profits out of cancer patients. And so for this endorsement actually means something, because one of the arguments against the single payer system is that doctors and, it's going to mess up doctors, and doctors will be against it because it's going to affect their income. Listen, let me tell you something. It's kind of like pilots, right? Doctors, don't get me wrong, doctors are still doing better compared to pilots. But at one time, pilots made a great wage. They made a great living. But as flying became more commodified, right? Pilots, you have some pilots who are flying and they're making like $30,000 a year to pilot a plane. And I'm sorry, I don't want my pilot stressed out over his bills while he's flying a plane. I can't handle that. But the reason I bring that up is because that is a fully capitalized system. And it has gone to the other extreme of not just being capitalized, but they're now commodified. And flying is just a number of a matter of numbers and digits and moving and shuffling pieces and trying to maximize profits. And a part of that calculus, as with everything else in our capitalistic system, a part of that process has always been to reduce the cost of labor. And so the inevitable outcome was always going to be that at some point, it was not going to be a first-rate career for you to be a pilot. At some point, they were going to reduce the wages, the salaries of pilots, and now they only include the cost of actual flight time in some airlines. What does this have to do with doctors? Well, doctors may be making a good living right now, some of them. But it is a natural evolutionary process in capitalism that the wages for doctors, the salaries for doctors will inevitably be reduced for the purposes of increasing profits for investors. It is inevitable. And so in this case, doctors have an opportunity with this endorsement. Not only are they endorsing it because it's better for individuals and their health and our collective health, but it's also going to be better for them in the long run. In the long run, it will secure the income of doctors versus having doctors and their salaries exposed to the whimsical forces of capitalism, which inevitably, can I repeat, prices inevitably go up, wages inevitably go down. I don't care what scenario. Let's take it away from pilots. Let's take it away from doctors. Let's go to the price of hamburgers. Remember when everyone was like, oh, if you raise the price of the wage for a worker at a fast food restaurant, then you're going to end up increasing the cost of a burger. Listen, wages at McDonald's have not gone up. But I'm old enough to remember a value menu of $2.99. You could get an entire meal for $2.99. Of course, because I've got the weight to show. I've actually participated in that $2.99 value meal often. But my dude, you cannot get a value meal now for less than $7. $8. You're coming out of there one meal and don't value size it. You end up spending $10. What am I saying? Obviously, you put it together by now. What I'm saying is prices will inevitably go up because of the greed of investors and the demand that companies always provide ever increasing profit margins for their investors, which inevitably causes prices to go up. But then the other side of it is for the cost of labor to go down. And this is applicable both to doctors. This is applicable to pilots. This is applicable to everyone who actually works for a living. If you have to wake up early in the morning and go to anybody's job in order to make your income, then you are on the same side as poor working people. You are not a capitalist if your primary source of income is your work and your labor. And I don't care if you are a doctor, that means that at some point, as prestigious as your job is, your labor costs are going to be attacked. Okay, I have to finish that thought. I was going to end the show, but I have to finish this thought. Class solidarity has to expand past prestige. Lawyers and doctors and people who have the top tier jobs. This is analogous to the vanity and the money that is used to co-opt radicals, right? It's put out. What's analogous here is this idea of a prestigious job, right? You have a prestigious job and you are making, let's say, $300,000 a year. That is a good living, especially for those of us who are in the working class, right? We look at that. Guys, can I just be honest with you? I've been slow to tell you this for years. Like I'm working class as hell. I've had sparks and I've had moments where, oh, look at this opportunity. I can, I'm doing better. Oh, I'm doing good. I'm making six figures for 3 months and then it's gone. Okay. But for the most of my life, I've been working class. Not really relevant to the subject, but I just wanted to tell you that. So when I hear somebody making $300,000 a year as a working class bloke, I'm like, damn, that's good money. But structurally, if that individual has to use their labor to receive that income, then they have more in common with me than they do the person who lays in the bed. And when they wake up to a new $500,000 because of their capital investments. That is the difference. But we have this thing of prestige. We have this thing where a person making $300,000 a year can move and maneuver. They can get a very nice car. They can have the nicest of clothes at a certain price point, and then they can go and hang out with billionaires. But they have less in common with the billionaire than they do us, right? And so this class solidarity has to go far beyond. That's why the saying is, workers of the world unite. Because if you have to work for a living versus waking up to new interest, new revenue, capital gains based on your investments, then we're not the same. I don't care how much you make every year. I think there might be a threshold. The threshold obviously is if you're making enough every year to then put enough into investments so that eventually you become a full capitalist versus a laborer, right? So if you're making a few $1 million a year, if you're like one of these NFL coaches and you're making like, I don't know, $10 million a year, 20 million, whatever obscene amount of money, then you have enough money to put into investments so that at one point you're not going to have to do any work. All you do is collect on your capital gains, right? So there is a threshold. I'm not being obtuse. There's going to be a threshold where certain people make so much money with their labor that they can become a capitalist. But $300,000 a year ain't that. Hell, $400,000. And if you're I know white folks, you have this paradigm too, but I don't really know personally. But in our world, when you're making $1 million a year as a black person, you're probably going to be financing your entire extended family. You know, you could be making $1 million a year and then at the end of the year have like $50,000 left to show for it. So I'm not asking anyone to have sympathy for these rich people because they're rich, but they're not capitalists. And they are subject to the same forces of capitalism, which increases the cost while it decreases the wages paid to labor. And I don't care what your job is. If your job is, if you are in a system that has investors, if you are not the owner, if you are not the primary investor, and you go punch a clock and you make a great salary, the fact of the matter is at some point, your wages are going to flatline or be decreased. And that point usually comes when your labor becomes a commodity. Just ask pilots. The point is this: class solidarity has to be expanded. And we have to stop the rich people who are making $300,000 a year. You're not rich. You're doing great, but you're not rich. And so some of these programs, just the way of thinking, it would behoove you to understand that you're doing good, but you are still subject to the forces that will decrease the price that they're paying you for your labor. You are still a laborer. You are still a worker. All right, I think I've made the point. Let me get ready to do this live stream. Come over to USDS on Facebook, United States Democratic Socialists, and I'll be streaming. I'll probably make the same exact arguments today just because I'm just getting started. We'll take some live calls tomorrow because I haven't been able to figure out the phone system yet. It's a little aggravating. But anyway, I'm gone. See you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.